The Senate will come to order. Would ask that unauthorized visitors exit chamber at this time as the Senate will come to order. Chair recognizes the senator from the 53rd. See his light?
Good morning, Mr. President. It's a glorious day at our state capitol, and we got a lot missing right now, but I'm sure they're working very hard for the people of Georgia. The journal's been read and found to be correct.
Thank you, Senator, for your good work. So in the journal is their objection with dispensing of the reading of the journal. The reading of the journal is dispensed with. Is their objection confirmation of the journal? Chair hears none, and the journal is confirmed. All senators having bills and resolutions introduced, please bring them to the Secretary's desk at this time. First, reading and reference of Senate bills and resolutions.
Senate Bill 380 by Senator Williams, the 39th, Oregon, the 36th, Henson, the 41st, and others. A bill entitled Enactment, Chapter 2, entitled
Ethics Committee.
Senate Bill 381 by Senator Thompson, the 14th, Schaefer, the 48th, Williams, the 27th.
Insurance and Labor.
Senate Bill 382 by Senator Martin, the 9th, Strickland, the 17th, Walker,
Health and Human Services.
Senate Bill 383 by Senator Warwick, the 36th, Butler, the 55th, Williams,
Natural Resources.
Senate Resolution 682 by Senator Henson, the 41st, Jones, the 22nd, Tate, the 38th, and others.
Judiciary.
Senate Resolution 685 by Senator Jackson, the 2nd, Jones, the 10th, Anderson, the 43rd, and others.
Urban Affairs.
Senate Resolution 695 by Senator Warwick, the 36th, Parent, the 42nd, Unterman, the 45th,
Natural Resources.
Mr. President, that concludes the order.
First reading and reference of House bills and resolutions.
House Bill Section 71 by President Donahue of the 30th, absent the 144th, Barr of the 103rd, and
Public Safety.
Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Secretary will read reports of standing committees.
Mr. President, Senate Committee on State and Local Government Operations has had under consideration the following legislation instructing report the same back to the Senate with following recommendation. House Bill 257 due pass submitted by Senator Kirk of the 13th. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Health and Human Services has had under consideration the following legislation instructing report the same back to the Senate with following recommendation. Senate Bill 352 due pass by substitute. Senate Bill 357 due pass by substitute. Senator Unterman for the 45th. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Agriculture and Consumer Affairs has under consideration the following legislation instructing report the same back to the Senate with following recommendation. Senate Bill 330 due pass by substitute. Senate by Senator Wilkinson of the 50th. Mr. President, Senate Rules Committee has had under consideration the following legislation instructing report the same back to the Senate with following recommendation. Senate Bill 17 pursuant to Senate Rule 21.10b referred by the Senate Rules Committee to the Senate Regulated Industries Committee from the General Calendar sent by Senator Moles of the 53rd. That concludes the order.
Secretary will read bills for the second time.
Senate Bill 248 by Senator Harbin, the 16th, and others. Life insurers requirement to review the National Association of Insurers Commissioners Life Insurance Policy Locator provide. Senate Bill 315 by Senator Thompson, the 14th, and others. Computer crimes created a new crime of unauthorized computer access. Penalties provide. Senate Bill 338 by Senator Ligon, the 3rd, and others. Administrative procedure agency rulemaking modify requirements. Senate Bill 348 by Senator Harper, the 7th, and others. Technical college system in Georgia powers the rest of campus policemen who are regular employees. Revised. Senate Bill 353 by Senator Anderson, the 24th, and others. Boilers and pressure vessels. Violations concerning the regulations, civil enforcement, and penalty authority in this Safety Fire Commissioner established. Senate Resolution 351 by Senator Schaefer of the 48th and others. Grady Memorial Hospital commend. Senate Resolution 353 by Senator Unterman of the 45th. Children's Health Care of Atlanta Therapy Dogs recognized. Senate Resolution 489 by Senator Ligon of the 3rd and others. Senate Study Committee on Prescribing Patterns for Antidepressants and Other Psychotropic Medications creates. Senate Resolution 503 by Senator Jackson II and others. Senate African American History and Culture Study Committee creates. Senate House Bill 61 by Representative Powell of the 171st and others. Sales and use tax for certain retailers to either collect or remit or notify purchaser in state required. That concludes the order.
It is now time for the morning roll call. Time for the morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th.
Mr. President, I have a parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
I would like to note that basically all of my caucus, the minority caucus, was here. And you only had one member of your caucus here before you rang the bell. So we were all in attendance, Mr. President, and I wanted to be noted that the minority caucus was here on time and ready for business. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and thanks for always being here and ready to do the Senate's business. And all the pretty red that is out there. I wore my red Friday, I'm sorry. Chair recognizes Senator from the 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 26th for business outside of the Capitol.
26, without objection, the senator from the 26th will be excused. Any other motions to excuse? 25th. Chair recognizes the senator from the 25th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the good senator from Bainbridge, Georgia.
Senator from the 11th, I saw him a moment ago. Without objection, Senator, it will be excused. Chair recognizes Senator from the 7th.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 9th for business inside the Capitol.
I saw him a moment ago, too. Without objection, Senator will be excused. Yeah. Senators, please signify your presence by voting the yea switch. Secretary will unlock the machine. It is now time for our morning devotion. Time for our morning devotion. Would ask that all senators please take your seats. Cease all audible conversation at this time. We are preparing the Senate for our morning devotion. Would ask that the doorkeepers, if you would, please secure the chamber at this time. It is now my distinct honor to call upon the distinguished senator from the 53rd for the purpose of leading us in our pledge and introducing our chaplain of the day. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. Please join me in honoring our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now let's honor our state. Pledge allegiance to the Georgia flag and to the principles for which it stands, wisdom, justice, and moderation. I hope everybody had a great weekend. It's a little dreary in my area, but it's great to be here this morning. I'd like to introduce my good friend, Joel Jenkins. He's a pastor of Midway Baptist Church in Rossville, Georgia, which is located in Catoosa County, barely. He and his wife of 16 years, Sarah, and they have two daughters, Lee and Gabby. They're here today, and also his parents, Winston and Verita Jenkins. Would you please help me welcome them in the audience? Great to have home folks here. Now, Joel not only is a pastor, but he's my favorite car salesman. He works at Jenkins Chrysler Dodge, and let me tell you what a good friend he is. While I'm down here and my wife having service on her vehicle, he usually lets her drive a new one home. And in the past, I've had to go by the dealership and sign paperwork. So he's such a good friend. But he is a man of Christ, and he's going to lead you like he does his congregation to the Lord. Would you please give your attention to Joel Jenkins?
Good morning. Good to see each one of you out this way this morning. What an honor and privilege it is to be here. Thank you, Senator Mullis, for the opportunity. Count it an honor and a privilege. It's something that I never thought I would be asked to do, but I'm not going to go into that. I got doing some research after Senator Mullis asked me to stand this morning, and I took it upon myself to go to your web page and found out what kind of job you had, a little more than what I didn't know. I think you have a tough job, each one of you. It's a job that you have, according to the census of 2010, you have 173,000 citizens that you have to look out after. And I think that's tough. I think it's a job where you can be persecuted and a job that you can be rewarded in too. And this morning, yesterday and the day before, as I was thinking, it carried me to the book of Job, and I was thinking about how Job's life was. Job was a well thought of man. He was a man that had plenty of money, had plenty of animals, had plenty of property, and he got everything taken away from him. But he never cursed the Lord. He never turned against the Lord. He always gave God the praise for what he had. And I think that's something that we all can take heed to, and looking into God's Word. We all face things, and each one of y'all face things with having to care after 173,000 people in each one of your district is what said the average was. I looked to it, and I was raised in a small town of Henniger, Alabama. My dad was the mayor there for many years, and I seen him have to make decisions that wasn't popular sometimes, just like you today. Some of your decisions ain't popular amongst people, and they look to you, and they talk down, or they talk at you, or whatever it might be. I want to encourage you today, as Job faced a lot of things in his life, that each one of us do the same. But thanks be to God that we have the opportunity to go to the Lord in prayer, go to the Lord and ask forgiveness, go to the Lord and just look to him for guidance and understanding and wisdom. Look for wisdom, because we all need that wisdom. And I want to encourage you that day. I know your job's difficult. Just listening around this Capitol this morning about making decisions on bills. You have to work with one another, and I'm thankful that you have that opportunity to do. The Lord's truly blessed. Job, it said in the first chapter there that he was from the land of Uz, whose name was Job, and that a man was perfect and upright, and that he feared God and he eschewed evil. Folks, there's so much evil in today's world that we have to seek him out daily, don't we? We have to seek God daily. We have to seek God in a way today that to show our kids and to show our loved ones that God is first in our life. And when Job did that, he had friends, as y'all have most probably read this story. He's had friends that come to him and would search after him. His own wife in the chapter 2 told him, after the devil got a hold of him and put the boils all over him, they put some, the Bible tells he took potsherd and he tried to scrape the boils off his skin. And his wife says, Job, why don't you just curse the Lord and die? I think that is something that Job said, oh, foolish one. I'm searching the Lord. I'm looking to God for guidance. And I want to encourage you, each one of you today. I want to encourage you to keep searching for the Lord. Keep looking to what God's got in store for us, because out of all the things that I've seen in my life, in my short life, I'd say that when you face people out in this world today, that they're not always the friendliest, or maybe they are the friendliest. But thank be to God that we can stand and give him the praise for everything he's given us and give him the praise for the opportunity to come. The story goes on to tell that that Job never cursed the Lord. And what did the Lord do in the 42nd chapter? He blessed Job with double with what he had. He gave him everything that he took away plus. And I want to encourage you today. You may have some harsh decisions to make and have to make tough decisions. But do it by searching for the Lord this morning. Do it by searching what God's asked you to do and seek him in all we do in our life. I think that would be, I tell my church at Midway to pray for you guys weekly. We do. We ask to pray for our country, for our leaders, and it is a tough position. I don't care what side of the party you're on or what party it is. You've got a tough position to fill. There's a lot of people looking to you. And I just want to encourage you today that there's tough times, but also there's good times. And I just count it as a blessing to be able to stand and talk about what God's done for us in this great country, this great state that we live in. This great state has been looked after, as I took some off of your internet, off of your web page, that our states looked to what Georgia did first, and they took some guidelines from what the state has done. What a blessing that is. That's truly a blessing this morning. I hope and pray that you continue on searching and seeking out God's help in all you do. I think it's a blessing that you have somebody come in and do a devotion each morning. Praise God for that today, starting a session out like that. Now, we'll go to the Lord in prayer if you'll all stand, and I'll turn it back over to the Brother Mullis. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we're thankful again for this another opportunity to come and bow in thy presence. Lord, we thank you for each one that's here today. What a job they have to do, Lord, and I pray, God, that you'd bless each one. I pray, God, that you'd touch their hearts, and Lord, that they'd look to thee for guidance and understanding and wisdom. I pray, Heavenly Father, that you'd be over their homes, dear God, and give them that they stand in need of, Lord. Lord, we're just so blessed to have a country to live in, to call the United States of America, and Lord, what it means to each one of these men and women here today. We're just thankful for that, dear God. Go with us. Let us always give you the praise and glory for what we've got. Thank you, Lord, for our Savior that died upon the cross at Calvary. All these things we ask in Jesus' sweet and holy name. Amen.
Let me have the Senate's attention for a moment, if I might. Ask that everyone lower their voice. We are very, very honored to have our doctor of today, and it's rare that we have a doctor of the day that happens to be the husband of a senator from the 32nd, but today we do. A wonderful, wonderful man. Anyone that can put up with a senator from the 32nd will have a lot of jewels in their crown when they get to heaven, I'm convinced of. But we value deeply the senator from the 32nd, and it's my honor now to recognize her to introduce our doctor of the day.
Thank you, Mr. President. My colleagues, this is sort of a rare opportunity. I'm not sure if it's ever happened before to have a senator introduce their spouse as Doctor of the Day, but that's what I'm about to do. I want to introduce my husband, Dr. Tom Haltom, and also I'm welcoming our daughter, Sydney Haltom, who's up here with us. And our son, Marshall, is in California, so I couldn't quite get him here for this event. Tom was born and raised in Natchez, Mississippi, where he played multiple sports and was a member of a state championship basketball team with a record of 36-0. He attended Millsaps College, where he majored in physics and played rugby, and then he went to medical school at Ole Miss. He did his emergency medicine residency at the University of Louisville, which is where we met. We married in 1986 and moved to Atlanta, where we raised our 2 children. Sydney is currently in graduate school in architecture at Georgia Tech, and she has to leave to go to class after this. And Marshall's in graduate school at Stanford in mechanical engineering. Dr. Haltom worked at Cobb General before taking over the emergency room contract at Windy Hill Hospital. Since that, he's worked at various emergency departments around the city, including North Fulton and St. Joe's. And for the last 13 years, he's worked in East Cobb at MedPost, and also is on staff at Northside Urgent Care. He's a member of the Georgia EMS Medical Directors Advisory Council. Dr. Haltom has been very active with Boy Scout Troop 1011. He's a member of the MAG Medical Reserve Corps. He enjoys playing tennis and is very involved in the East Cobb community. He's been the doctor of the day before last year, and I think Senator Donzella James can attest to that. So without further ado, I would like you all to help me welcome Dr. Haltom.
All right, good. And before we do, we actually have a twofer here today. We have a special resolution that the senator from the 35th has introduced on behalf of the good physician. If you would read, Secretary.
Senate Resolution 698 by Senator James of the 35th. A resolution recognizing and commending Dr. Thomas Lamb Haltom for saving the life of Senator James during the 2017 legislative session and for other purposes. Whereas Dr. Thomas Lamb Haltom has served as an emergency physician at various locations across the state of Georgia since 1989, and whereas during the 2017 legislative session at the Georgia State Capitol, Dr. Haltom noticed that Senator James was acting strangely after she had told him that she was not feeling well, and felt as though she was going to pass out before she entered the chamber, and whereas Dr. Haltom insisted that she seek immediate medical care, warning that waiting as little as 2 hours could have a tragic outcome, and referred her to a lung specialist at Atlanta Medical, where she was seen that very day, and whereas it was learned that Senator James had previously been misdiagnosed with bronchitis when she in fact had a case of double pneumonia and a blood clot in her lungs. And whereas the awareness and quick thinking of Dr. Haltom ultimately saved the life of Senator James that fateful day at the Capitol, and she's forever grateful and indebted to him for taking action, that therefore be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize and commend Dr. Thomas Lamb Haltom. That concludes the order.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? Chairs none. The resolution is adopted. It's my honor now to call upon the senator from the 35th to speak to the resolution before we hear from the good doctor.
Thank you very much. If I can talk, because I'm so full. This is my first time seeing the doctor since that day. I didn't even know his name. He saw me, and he recognized that something was really wrong with me. I had been to urgent care, and they told me it was bronchitis. I thought I was doing better. And I was really dying. The hospital even told me I probably wouldn't have made it another few hours when I got there. So, doctor, from the bottom of my heart, I tell you, I had not been to that health care downstairs probably more than 10 times in my whole life, mostly to just get an aspirin for a headache or something. And the day that I had to go, my angel was there. That was you. And so from the bottom of my heart, I thank you and all the doctors who come here to treat us. And you are definitely exemplary. You're outstanding. And a resolution is not enough. So I wanted to give you a higher honor. And it's probably one of the highest honors that we can give. And it's the Outstanding Georgia Citizen Award. It's from the Secretary of State, and it reads, I, Brian P. Kemp, Secretary of State of the State of Georgia, do hereby proclaim Thomas Lamb Alton as Outstanding Georgia Citizen. May this outstanding citizen be afforded every courtesy as a goodwill ambassador from Georgia in his travels to other states, to nations beyond the borders of the United States of America, or wherever he may hereafter travel or reside. Thank you for your service to our state. And it's in testimony, it's signed by our Secretary of State. And I want to thank our Lieutenant Governor for all that he does as well. And thank your wife for being such a great person to marry, such a great man. God bless you. We love you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for saving my life.
Thank you. Oh, boy. I wasn't expecting that. Mr. President, senators, and guests, I appreciate the opportunity to serve as the MAG Doctor of the Day. Please come see me in the medical station for anything, particularly medical concerns and questions. Thank you.
Well done, Tom. Well done. That was awesome. Great surprise. We have another special group we would like to recognize, and the Secretary will read a resolution.
Senate Resolution 650 by Senators Huffstetler of the 52nd, Kirkpatrick of the 32nd, Burke of the 11th, and others. A resolution recognizing the Georgia Academy of Anesthesiologist Assistants and for other purposes. Whereas certified anesthesiologist assistants work in the physician-led anesthesia care team to deliver high-level perioperative care to patients. And whereas there are more than 900 certified anesthesiologist assistants currently licensed and practicing in Georgia. And whereas 2 of the nation's 12 anesthesiologist assistant training programs are located in Georgia at Emory University in Atlanta and South University in Savannah. And whereas certified anesthesiologist assistants work everywhere anesthesia services are needed, including large hospitals, small town hospitals, endoscopy suites, ambulatory surgical centers, and MRI suites. Now therefore be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize the Georgia Academy of Anesthesiologist Assistants for its dedication to the health and well-being of the citizens of the state of Georgia. That concludes the order.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair is none. The resolution is adopted. It is always a great honor to welcome so many individuals to the Senate, and certainly the anesthesiology assistants that are present with us today, along with our own senator from the 52nd. It is now my privilege to recognize him to introduce our special guest and speak to the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's great to have the group here that come from, in this state, from Emory University and from South University. I've been a commencement address speaker at Emory, and my counterpart has done the same thing at South University in the past. We've got Dr. Heather Dozier over here that is the past president of the American Society of, or the Georgia Society of Anesthesiology, and Katie Monroe, an instructor at Emory, Jennifer Stever, that's also an instructor at Emory, Chris Tyndall, Miller Ross, all here. Claire Wainwright is the president of the anesthesia assistants in Georgia this year, and I'll have her speak for a moment. But I always want to say at this point that people think, well, you put them to sleep, you wake them up. That's the easy part. You know, we're taking care of the entire body while the surgeon's doing what he does. Blood pressure, heart rate, pain, electrolytes. We give them blood products if needed, and we take care of people during this critical time, and it's really an honor to do it. And before I have Claire speak, if I would have all those that are in school at South or Emory, if you could stand up if you're up in the balcony. All right, and Claire Wainwright, the current president, if you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you, Senator Hufstetler. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members of the Senate, for allowing us to be here today. I'm Claire Wainwright. I'm a certified anesthesiologist assistant that works in Athens. Wonderful group that we have out there. I want to thank you for your recognition of our profession and the service that we provide to patients here in Georgia. Thank you for your recognition of our students and of our leadership, and we appreciate all the work that you do tirelessly to help us and to represent us and to recognize us within the medical community.
Awesome.
Governor, how you doing? Good seeing you again. Good to see you as well. How you doing? Good to see you. Very good to see you. God bless you. Good to see you. I'm going to send this in this chamber. Good to see you.
All right, good. We ready? We have another special group we would like to recognize at this time. Secretary will read a resolution.
Senate Resolution 697 by Senator Jackson II. A resolution recognizing and commending Bishop Reginald Jackson and the African Methodist Episcopal Church and for other purposes, whereas Bishop Reginald Jackson has demonstrated his commitment to teaching the gospel, witnessing Christ through word and deed, and addressing the physical, psychological, intellectual, and spiritual needs of others, whereas he is the 132nd elected and consecrated bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, whereas Bishop Jackson's vision and direction have helped the African Methodist Episcopal Church grow in size and influence, whereas he has also dedicated his life to bringing attention to the injustices in society and has won numerous awards recognizing his selfless work. Therefore, be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize and commend the outstanding accomplishments of Bishop Reginald Jackson in the ministry of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. That concludes the order.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The resolution is adopted. It is a great honor to have Bishop Jackson here with us in the Senate and to speak to the resolution and recognize our very special Georgian. It's my honor now to call upon the distinguished senator from the 2nd.
Colleagues, good morning. Before I speak to the resolution, I'd like to recognize the Young People's Department of the Ame Church in the gallery today. Will you please rise? The Ame Church was founded in 1787, founded by Bishop Richard Allen. The Ame Church is founded in Georgia in 1865. We have 520 churches in Georgia, from our southern coast to the mountains of Georgia. The Ame Church is the oldest African-American church denomination in the United States. Henry McNeil Turner was a AME bishop, and he served in this body, and his portrait is in the halls today. Bishop Reginald Jackson is the leader of the AME Church. He walks with Jesus. He has been chosen to lead Georgia in a positive direction in the words of Christ. I present to you Bishop Reginald Jackson.
To the Lieutenant Governor, to the members of the Senate, delighted to be with you here today and to have with us members of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. The young people who are here, I understand, are on tour. But for all the other AMEs who are here in the gallery, would you please stand? We may acknowledge your presence. The African Methodist Episcopal Church is the first Protestant denomination formed on American soil, and the month of February is Founders Month for our denomination, which is now over 200 years old. A distinguished history, this denomination has made a tremendous impact on the life of this nation. So we are delighted to be here today at the Georgia State Capitol to provide members of our denomination a chance to see how government works on behalf of the people, for the people, and by the people. Again, we are delighted to be with you. Thank you for this opportunity to come and share in the people's house. Thank you so much.
Well done, well done. Thank you, Bishop. Are there any unanimous consents? Any senator wishing to rise on a point of personal privilege? Chair first recognizes senator from the 29th. on a point of personal privilege. Please give the senator your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning. I just wanted to take a moment with you today to talk a little bit about the Super Bowl. I don't know if anybody got a chance to see the Super Bowl yesterday. It was played, you may not know this, but it was played yesterday in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Very nice dome stadium there. I'm sure they couldn't play outside if they were trying to play that game up there this time of year. But the reason I wanted to take a few moments to recognize that fact is that Minnesota, along with 32 other states all over this great land, protects the free exercise rights of their citizens at the very same level, whether they are dealing with the federal government, the state government, or the local government. Can you believe that? Because we've been told for the last 5 years that if we offered that basic protection to our citizens, that we wouldn't be able to get the Super Bowl. And maybe you say, well, Josh, you know, this is one Super Bowl. Can you really draw any conclusion from one Super Bowl? So I looked at the last 10 years. And over the last 10 years, 8 of the 10 locations were held in states that offer Religious Freedom Restoration Act protections. So I hope that perhaps, I know there have been barrels and barrels of ink spilled over this issue and lots of studies written. I'm just hoping that maybe there's some time, some television time, or some space in the newspaper to report on the fact that states don't have to choose between economic prosperity and individual human freedom. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Chair now recognizes Senator from the 36th. 36th. I do not see the senator from the 36th. We will move on to the senator from the 14th. Will be recognized this time.
Thank you, Mr. President, and to the Senator of the 29th, speaking of barrels, I'd rise today to do Anheuser-Busch. Through a partnership with American Red Cross, Anheuser-Busch has provided water and supplies to affected natural disaster areas since 1906. And since 1988, Anheuser-Busch has donated over 79 million cans of emergency drinking water to communities affected by the natural disasters. Just last year, AB produced and shipped over 1.8 million cans of emergency drinking water to the communities hit by Hurricanes Harvey and Irma. They've allowed a long-standing tradition of pausing their beer production to produce clean, safe drinking water for those areas affected by natural disasters. What I'm particularly proud about is each one of you, Senator, have a can of water that's on your desk. And you'll notice the Super Bowl took place yesterday, and there was a commercial that was a part of yesterday's festivities. That commercial was filmed not in Cartersville, Georgia. And so the plant manager, Kevin, was featured in that. And just like to take note and highlight Anheuser-Busch for being a good partner not only in our community, but for what they do by sacrificing dollars to serve people around the world in a time of need. And with that, this bud's for you.
All right. Dilly dilly. Smiling now to recognize a good senator who's back joining us today. Jack Murphy is with us in the house. So give him a round of applause. Good to have you back, Senator. We have a resolution to read. Secretary will read.
Senate Resolution 677 by Senator C. the 34th, Butler the 55th, Jordan the 6th, and others, a resolution recognizing February 2nd, 2018 as National Wear Red Day and for other purposes. Whereas cardiovascular diseases are the #1 killer of women in the United States, whereas about 80% of cardiovascular diseases may be prevented because many factors which lead to it can be controlled, including blood pressure, smoking habits, cholesterol levels, and physical activity. Whereas the American Heart Association's Go Red for Women movement motivates women to learn their family history and to meet with a healthcare provider to determine their risk for cardiovascular disease and stroke. Now therefore be resolved by the Senate that members of this body recognize February 2nd, 2018 as National Wear Red Day and encourage all citizens to show their support for women in the fight against heart disease by wearing the color red. That concludes the order.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair is none. The resolution is adopted. Speak to the resolution. It's my honor now to call upon the senator from the 34th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. I rise again on this great Monday morning to thank this body for honoring me by wearing red on today. We all know that the National Day was on Friday, which this body was in recess. So I wanted to say to each and every one of you who remembered to wear your red, please join me right here in the well. Let's take a good, strong picture of everybody that chose to wear red. And those of you who forgot, if you are wearing a red dress pin on your lapel, please join us as well, because this is a very important issue. Unfortunately, they were here on Friday, the American Heart Association, but I have them a resolution that I will be presenting to them. But we want to send a message that heart disease is not just that one day. Heart disease is killing women in record numbers, but it is the #1 killer, not breast cancer, not all the cancers. It's the #1 killer of everyone, and it can be prevented. You just have to know your numbers. Mr. President, thank you for allowing this. If you all would, just join us down here right quickly so we can get a great big group picture. Thank you.
You earned it.
At the end, when everything.
Yeah, that works. All right. Okay, y'all clear the well now. All right. Chair now recognizes Senator from the 45th on a point of personal privilege.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. And boy, you can tell it's an election year when we got everybody going red for women, right? With heart disease. That was fabulous. Thank you so much for supporting women who unfortunately suffer from heart disease. Unfortunately, I'm up here to talk about an issue that is very serious and something that I would like to recognize. And unfortunately, it affects many, many people and causes extreme heartache for different families. And in the House this morning, they are showing a video about suicide prevention. And they're showing a trailer on a movie called Holding On. It's produced by Tamlin Hall, and it's received many awards as a documentary about the prevention and awareness of suicide. As most of you know, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. Each year, 44,965 Americans die by suicide. One of the most significant statistics, unfortunately, that we learned this year, and I only learned of it because of Director Vernon Keenan, who brought it to my attention, is the rising incidence of suicide among the very young Georgians. And when we talk about very, very young, we're talking about 5-year-olds. And yes, the state of Georgia, as I was told in a forum on suicide prevention, did have a 5-year-old death. And most of these deaths are tracked by the GBI and by the Infant Mortality Commission, who is our responsible organization that presents this data to us. And unfortunately, they are seeing trends in adolescent suicides. So I think it's very apropos that the House is showing the trailer for the video. And even more significantly, I ask you to work with me. I believe the governor has put into the big budget, the 19 budget, $25 million, I believe. I haven't actually seen it yet, for mental health for children. And of course, if we get children where they're younger and they receive therapeutic services when they're 5, 6, 7, and 8 years old, hopefully they do not have the consequences of no therapeutic services when they're 10, 11, and 12 years old. So I ask you to join with me in working on that budget, and we look forward to saving more lives from suicide. Thank you very much, and I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 36th. You wish to be recognized?
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise today in the spirit of February being Black History Month to call your attention to the fact that this is Rosa Parks Day. Rosa Parks, a internationally known and recognized civil rights activist, was born on February 4th, 1913 in Tuskegee, Alabama. On her birthday, she's recognized throughout the nation and the world as the First Lady of Civil Rights. She's been called the Mother of the Freedom Movement. It was her historic stand of refusing to give up her seat to a white passenger in the white-only section. She was arrested, and as they say, the rest is history. The Montgomery Bus Boycott was launched, was historic, was one of the 1 or 2 longest systematic protests in the history of the civil rights movement, and resulted, of course, in desegregation efforts and federal laws enacted to protect and affirm the rights of citizens of color to claim their seat on public transit. Some of the accolades that have been given to Rosa Parks depicted her as a meek, mild seamstress who just simply didn't have the energy to get up out of her seat when the bus driver ordered her to. But in truth, she was a dedicated civil rights activist. And she wasn't, as she says that day, tired from her seamstress job. She was tired of putting up with the mess of Jim Crow segregation in the South. And that act catapulted her into history. And she continued her civil rights activism throughout her long, long life, just passing away in Detroit, Michigan in 2005. Today, we're recognizing, as part of saluting the leadership and courage and tenacity of Rosa Parks, this is Transit Equity Day. Her act back then put a stake in the ground, and we still today pursue equity in transit. There are several advocacy organizations who gathered here in Liberty Plaza today to lift that banner and to call for our transportation efforts to acknowledge the paramount necessity of equity in transit. When we don't provide transit and provide it to where it's needed, we are, in point of fact, barring people from getting to jobs, from getting to church, from getting to doctor's appointments. We are happy to see forward motion on transit in our metropolitan region today. We're happy to see more leaders in our state embracing this direction, and we want to applaud that, support it, and always be vigilant that we are applying our dollars and our transit planning in ways that provide equity in transit, and we do so in the name of Rosa Parks. Thank you, and I'll yield the well.
Just as a reminder to the chamber that the gallery is there to respectfully watch and observe and not participate. Chair recognizes Senator from the 1st.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today on a somber note. Almost 150 passengers on the Amtrak train coming from New York going to Miami were involved in an accident last Sunday morning, about 2:50 in the morning. The dark hours, they ran into a stalled or another vehicle on the tracks, and of the 150 or so, 116 were injured and about 3 in serious or critical condition, but unfortunately 2 were killed. The conductor from Florida, Michael Sella, was 36 years old, and from my district in Savannah and Richmond Hill, Michael Kempf, who was 54 years old, were both killed. If I could ask the Senate just for a moment of silence for these individuals to give us, let us show them our respect.
Senator has requested prayer. Let us pray.
Thank you very much.
Amen. Chair now recognizes the Senator from the 46th on a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. I'm honored today to be able to bring a resolution for Georgia Prostate Cancer Coalition and recognizing tomorrow, which will be Prostate Cancer Awareness Day. A lot of people don't realize this, but every year 241,000 men are diagnosed with prostate cancer, with over 31,000 of those men losing their lives to this disease every year. Men actually have a higher risk of getting prostate cancer than women do of getting breast cancer. 1 in 7 men are at risk of this disease. But fortunately, if you do the early screening through your PSA test, you're able to catch this at an early time where you have much greater chances of recovering from it, and it is treatable. So we want to bring this to everybody's attention, remind all men to get your annual screening, and we want to thank so much the people from the Georgia Prostate Cancer Coalition for the hard work that they do. Many of them are in the gallery today. If you would please join me in honoring them with a good round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from the 17th. 17th. No? Well, at least he's in the chamber this time, but the cat has his tongue, and he is not able to address the chamber at this time. Chair now recognizes senator from the 53rd. 53rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm here to talk about what we're about to make a decision on here shortly, and agree or disagree on the adoption bill. And I really just want to thank the leadership of the Senate, both majority and minority, and the Lieutenant Governor, the President of the Senate, and the members for allowing us a day, or in this case over the weekend, to make sure that the agrees or disagree or the information in the bill is so that we can understand it, make the right decision. So, Mr. President, I'm just here to thank the leadership of both sides to give us the opportunity to make sure we make wise decisions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes senator from the 10th. This will be the last point of personal privilege for the day.
Thank you, Mr. President and member of this body. I was not planning on being up here this morning, but I've learned of an issue that's happening in this body that requires my attention. And I am specifically talking about the de-annexation and the re-annexation of a city that I represent in Henry County, the city of Stockbridge. I was first told that there will be a committee hearing in Slogo on Thursday of this week. However, I've been told recently that that schedule has been changed, and the new time for the Slogo meeting is tomorrow morning at 8:00 a.m., which I believe presents numerous obstacles to members of my party that live in close proximity to the city that would have to drive here in order to make it to an 8:00 meeting. However, with all due respect to the chairman of the Slogo committee, there are a few things that I would like to share because it's my understanding that tomorrow's vote will only be a vote only, and there would not be an opportunity to discuss this issue. Specifically, I feel it's very important that members of this body understand what's happening with Senate Bill 262 and Senate Bill 263. And what I'm suggesting to you is that this body has never ever taken this kind of an action before, not in its history of this great state. And I'm sure every member has heard about the de-annexation and re-annexation of a city of Stockbridge, but I just like to share very quickly, Mr. President, a few concerns that I have as well as the members of this great city. Specifically, Senate Bill 262 and 263 will have a devastating effect on the city of Stockbridge. Carl Vinson Institute estimated that this city will lose almost half of its revenues. Roughly $8.5 million budget, half of that is gone by this, if in the event Senate Bill 262 and 263 passes. Not only that, but this bill would take away nearly 45% of the city's acreage and an estimated 58% of the city's operating revenue. I've already discussed about the dangerous precedent that this bill and this legislation creates. It should also be noted that there's companion legislation at the House that's even worse than this. I think it should be noted that the city of Stockbridge and its home rule and its sovereign boundaries have certain obligations that it's already committed to financially. Neither of these bills take that into account. Many don't care that the public finance expert, including the city's bond council, are very concerned about this, not only because of the impact on Stockbridge, but the impact that it's going to have on this city's bond ratings. It should be noted that currently Stockbridge does not have a property tax on any of its citizens. In the event this bill passes, those that are left in the city would be forced to pay a huge property tax. Some is trying to make this a partisan issue, and I would suggest to you there's nothing partisan about splitting up a city, because I know for a fact I did not get 100% of the vote in Stockbridge. That means there must be a fair amount of Democrats and Republicans that live in this city. And for the record, I've not recalled a single citizen that has come to me and shared with me this is a great idea. Nor have I been approached by those on the other side that's attempting to split up this city to even ask me to be part of their deliberation. As you see, this city and these bills have come about in the darkness and cover of night. But let me just tell you what I love about Stockbridge, a community of 28,000, a city that I represent 100% of. What I love the most is that it's a very diverse city. Roughly 65% of its citizens are non-white. That includes Black, Latino, Asian, Indian. Stockbridge, which is the largest city in Henry County, where I've lived for the last 26 years of my life, is also the largest city in Henry County. And it's because of their diversity that this city has grown to what it is today. I would encourage the chairman of the SLOGO committee to delay a vote on this tomorrow to give the citizens an opportunity to have input on this pending legislation. And the reason why I said that is because we had a hearing back in August of last year with certain members of the SLOGO committee. However, there's new members on the SLOGO committee today, and I know the senator from the 17th that is sponsoring this bill is a new member on the SLOGO committee. I also know that the SLOGO committee has a new chairperson as well. And I don't know that there's been a hearing to present the findings from the Carl Vinson Institute to the newest members of the SLOGO committee, and I would encourage the chairperson for this committee to consider both sides in this argument, and at the very least to give the members of Stockbridge an opportunity to present their findings to his committee. And thank you. I yield away.
You have a consent calendar of privilege resolutions that are before you. Is there objection? Without objection, the consent calendar of privilege resolutions are therefore adopted. Any motions to withdraw or commit? Chair recognizes the senator from the 46th, the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate engross House Bill 661. It's a finance bill in accordance with our tradition.
Read the caption.
House Bill 661 by Representatives Williamson of the 115th and others, a bill will be titled and act amends Titles 15, 44, and 48 of the OCGA relating to courts, property, and revenue and taxation, respectively, so as to revise provisions relating to the transmittal, filing, recording, access to, and territorial effect of tax liens issued by the Department of Revenue and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Is there objection? Objection. Chair recognizes Senator from the 41st.
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that by engrossing this bill, it hurts the opportunity for members to perfect the legislation?
Senator knows from which he speaks. Question is on the motion for engrossment. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the motion to engross House Bill 661, the yeas are 36 and the nays are 15, and this bill has been engrossed. Secretary will read Senate Bill 331, starting on the calendar of the day.
Senate Bill 331 by Senator Henson of the 41st and others, a bill be titled Enactment Article 1 of Chapter 27, Title 50 of the OCGA, relating general provisions regarding the Georgia Lottery for Education Act, so as to allow a winner of a lottery prize to remain anonymous under certain conditions and for other purposes. Senate Amendment 1 by Senator Dugan of the 30th and Henson of the 41st offers the following Amendment 1 to Senate Bill 331 by adding on line number 13, after winner, the words of awards of $250,000 or greater. Senate Amendment 2 by Senator Tippins of the 37th, author following Amendment 2 to Senate Bill 331 by placing a period after the word confidential in line 15 and striking the word and striking lines 16 through 18 in their entirety. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator in the 41st. Speak to the bill. Present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. I am rising today to speak to you about an important issue that will save lives and protect the public. You know, the senator from the 4th and myself came in when the governor was pushing the Georgia lottery, and we were here when the referendum was passed to create the lottery, and it is very important to us that the lottery be protected and maintained. The bill before you today, I think, is a good thing for the Georgia lottery. It will actually encourage more people to buy tickets, I believe, because you will have a feeling that you're going to be safer when you buy your ticket. I place on your desk numerous cases, including one from Georgia, where lottery winners, after winning, were victimized. Some murdered, some suffered violent crimes, and there were pages on pages of lottery winners who have had scams and people tried to come after them in ways to take their lottery winnings away by unscrupulous means. So therefore, I think Georgia should join states like Texas and Delaware and Kansas and North Dakota and allow a degree of anonymity to Georgia lottery winners. Right now, the practice is if you have a winning from the Georgia lottery, according to their government affairs representative, their practice is that if you ask for confidentiality, they will respect that and not do a press release or release your name unless they get a FOIA request or a media representative, bona fide media representative, ask them. At that time, they would give the name and your location. So that creates a danger, especially if you're a big winner. I had a town hall meeting on the 29th, Monday night. We had about 100 people there, and we asked them, if you had a chance, would you like to win $400 million in the Georgia lottery? Everybody there would like to win $400 million. We asked them again, if you won $400 million, how many of you would like to have those winnings confidential? everybody was in agreement that they would like that. So it's something that your constituents will like. Now let's talk about a couple key aspects. One, the integrity of the lottery system. This in no ways hurt the security or effectiveness of Georgia Lottery. The protocols that go in place, how they pick winners, how the balls are put into the containers, how they are drawn, how those are supervised, all go to maintaining the security and the effectiveness of Georgia Lottery. Georgia Lottery is one of the most secure and effective programs in the country, and Georgia residents can be sure of that. So we don't have to worry about that. What we do have to worry about are your constituents who may be victimized, and we can do something today to protect them, to allow confidentiality if they win. Now, before you are a couple amendments. One amendment says that we exclude the smaller prizes of $250,000 or less. By far, most of the prizes that Georgia Lottery gives out are the $10, $5, $15, $100, $1,000 winners, much more than the $1 million winners. You know, I signed this amendment because I think we're going in the right direction with this bill. And if the vast amount of those tickets are below $250,000 and the Georgia Lottery thinks it's easier not to worry about them, I'm fine with that, because quite frankly, the present practice is if you win a $10,000 winner or a $100,000 winning, or even $1 million winning, the general practice today is they will not release your name unless there's a FOIA request or a bona fide press person goes ask for it. And they don't inquire on these smaller winners. So I don't think there's a real problem with that, and if it makes the Georgia Lottery officials happy, I'm fine to support it. The second amendment goes to the 4% fee. When I initiated this bill, I had, from reference, a bill the senator from the 29th had a couple years ago. And his bill was to allow confidentiality, but charge a 15% basically tax or fee to cover those winnings, so allow you to remain anonymous. I thought that was too high and not right. But as I processed it, I thought, well, if the Georgia Lottery Corporation needs to hold a seminar and train its employees of this new confidentiality, or if they incurred any cost at all by doing this program or making these changes, it shouldn't come out of our money we send to education. The winner should be paying for that out of his confidential winnings. I don't think there will be any expense, quite frankly. The lottery is secure, and they really shouldn't have to spend more money to secure it. I really don't expect any expense. There's an amendment to actually take that 4% out of the bill so that we don't confuse things. I'll let each and every member make up his mind on whether that's necessary. I don't expect there are any expenses. The lottery department hadn't come to me and said it's going to cost about a 1% to do this. So if they want to come later and make that assessment and inform members, I'm sure in the House we can fix that. So I'll leave that up to you. But if you would just look at this paper and see that the citizens of Georgia who have been victimized, or citizens around this country and around this world that have been victimized, you know this is an important thing, that we keep these winnings confidential, if so requested by the individual. If they want their 15 minutes of fame or 5 seconds of fame and want it disclosed and want to go on TV, they still can do that. So, Mr. President, I urge every member of the Senate to support Senate Bill 331, and I will yield for any questions.
You do have a couple questions. Chair recognizes the senator from the 18th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
I yield.
A question, is the word confidential defined, or is there any source that we can look back to see how confidential is defined? So, Senator, we have some idea of what are the obligations going to be on the Georgia Lottery Corporation going forward with respect to the winner?
The legal counsel maintains that would allow them, you know, under the first part, to remain the confidential winner, which would exclude them from the open records request. And so that is referring back to that. So basically, the confidentiality would be allow them to not release that name and exempt them from the state open records request.
Does the senator yield?
I yield.
Are we aware of, or as the author of the bill, do you have in mind that there would be any other obligations on either the Georgia Lottery Corporation or the state of Georgia going forward beyond what you just defined?
Besides maintaining confidentiality of the winner?
Yes.
No.
And lastly, Senator, can you flesh out a little bit what the anticipated cost would be to the Georgia Lottery Corporation?
Well,
and secondly, would there be any cost to the state of Georgia independent of the cost of the Lottery Corporation?
Good points and good questions. First of all, I don't really expect any cost, but I wanted the Lottery Corporation to feel comfortable if there was educational seminars and informing their people, or if they wanted to bring a third party in to verify the integrity and security of our, another bell or whistle because of this addition. I don't really expect that. They haven't presented to me that there would be additional cost. I was just being super cautious to make sure they were covered. Now, as far as the cost, the unintended consequences of this bill, some states have deferred doing this because they are afraid that the public acknowledgement of these winners helps drive lottery sales. They figure, if you know there's a winner in Hayhira, Georgia that won $100 million, that helps promote. It makes it exciting, and sales may tick up in Hayhira or around the state when people hear about this. But, personally, I feel that in other states, and have seen in other states, no real loss of sales. That knowing John Smith and how there's so much press and so much publicity on these big amounts, especially, I don't think it makes a significant difference. But that is a concern in some states that haven't done it. They're worried that the advertisement, may help sell tickets. But quite frankly, I feel that the public safety is an important issue, and we should consider that paramount. And quite frankly, a lot of winners are going to elect to go ahead and have their name disclosed because they want a little bit of fame.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 31st.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
I yield.
On line 16, you refer to 4% of his or her winnings. Would that winnings in that case, is that the sum of the payments, or is that the value? Like if you win $1 million, is that 4% of $1 million, or is that 4% of the sum of the payments that you would receive?
Well, it'd be gross, so it wouldn't be net after taxes. So it'd be if you won $100 million, the way the bill is, not referring to Senator Tippin's amendment, the way the bill is, the Lottery Corporation could keep up to 4%, $4 million. And if it were, you decided to, take that money in annuity, it would still be, then you get $96 million in annuity. So up to 4% of the gross amount of the winnings.
You further yield.
Now, that $100 million was probably in an annuity, so, it would be 4% of the annuitized amount, yeah. But yeah, I yield.
If there were a notice printed on the ticket that said that by purchasing this ticket, you agree to the use by the Lottery Commission of your likeness and name in promotion of the lottery, which would take precedence, the law or the contract that you agree to when you purchase a ticket?
Well, definitely the law would take precedent, and they would have to make that, on the ticket, it would have to conform with state statute.
Do you further yield?
I yield.
In the case of multi-state lotteries, how would this apply? If a Georgian bought a lottery ticket in another state for a lottery that is also, tickets are also available here,
It would allow confidentiality in the state of Georgia. And several states do have confidentiality on the multi-state Powerball and Mega Millions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Senator from the 21st for a question.
Senator Yield.
I yield.
Using that example of a $100 million winner and the $4 million, where does that $4 million go? Does it stay with the Lottery Corporation? Does it go in their general fund?
Again, it wouldn't go to the students. What it would be used for solely is, as it says on line 17, 18, required for maintaining such confidentiality. So up to 4% could be used if the lottery corporation felt there were any cost for maintaining such confidentiality. Again, it's my expectation it would be nowhere near 4%, but I wanted to err on the side of safety because I wanted, a lot of, corporation to be confident. Yeah.
Further you mentioned marketing because it does bring a lot of popularity if someone wins it. So would this money be able to be spent on marketing?
No, the lottery corporation does, of course, have a marketing budget, but this would be used to maintain such confidentiality. It wouldn't be used for marketing.
Thank you.
No further questions, Senator.
Thank you. Mr. President, again, I refer the members of this body to the fact that Texas, Delaware, Kansas, North Carolina have laws of anonymity. Maryland doesn't have an express law, but it does in their evaluation and definition of open records. Because this deals with money, they are able to keep it confidential. Arizona has a confidential law that, requires it kept separate for quiet or secret for 90 days to protect the public. So, in Colorado, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Ohio, and Vermont permit the awarding of prize to a trust that could be kept secret. So there are a lot of states that recognize that in the public interest to protect the public, that we should allow confidentiality and anonymity. So I hope the Georgia Senate will back that for our constituents. Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Senator from the 30th speak to his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. The senator for the 41st has already pretty much addressed my amendment, but since I'm the first name on that amendment, I figured I would stand up and reiterate that what we're talking about is a vast majority of the winnings within the lottery are smaller numbers. And it would bog down the system if you included everything in there. So all it does is take the higher earning awards and making them part of this bill, of this pending legislation, and not putting all the smaller amounts in there. So to your questions.
No questions, Senator. Chair now recognizes Senator from the 37th on speak to amendment number 2. Gentleman from Cobb. Senator from the 41st failed to recognize him as the senator from the 37th or the gentleman from Cobb. Reminder.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I appreciate the opportunity to bring Amendment 2. This basically removes the 4% charge in its entirety. I do it for 3 reasons. Number one, the minority leader made it clear this is a public safety issue, and that should be our first and foremost consideration, either the real or the perceived threat that goes along with winning huge sums of money. We've been cited today many of those instances. Second, I guess old age teaches you some things, and I've learned that you don't have to apologize for those things that you don't say, and you don't have to take back actions that you didn't do. I don't see where the state incurs a cost by not taking an action, which would be releasing the name. All of this is processed. The person has the opportunity to request to remain anonymous or for their name to be published. If you don't publish the name, I don't see where you have a cost. In terms of the auditing of that, we have audits already who confirm that those people who won the audits, who won the lottery and the winnings, received those winnings. So I don't see any downside to this. I don't see any potential cost. One of my colleagues asked me the question, will this take away money from education? I don't see how that will be, because it should be a matter of standard practice. If someone makes a request and it's authorized by law, this will put it in statute. Those names are just not released. I don't believe people buy lottery tickets when the jackpot gets high because they know who won the last lottery. But they know somebody won the last lottery, and they're driven to buy tickets because of the size of the payout. I urge you to support Amendment number 2. I think it protects our public, and I think actually it may enhance the sale of lottery tickets when people know that they will not be exposed and have their name put out before the public to make them a potential victim of crime. Mr. President, if there are no questions, I'll yield the well.
You do have a question. Senator from the 40th is recognized.
Gentleman yields.
Yes, sir.
Is it not true that I understand what you're doing, and I'm going to support your amendment, but I would say that if it turns out, if this bill goes over to the House and we find out, for example, it's confidentiality, if somehow somebody's name gets out, what I'm concerned about, that the Lottery Corporation will also be dragged into a legal proceeding, and there would be costs in that particular case. That's about the only thing I could come up with when we had the bill come through committee. But other than that, I think at this point, I'm going to support your amendment. But if somehow, if there's other things that come up and it comes back from the House, if it passes over there, then I may have to reconsider. I just want you to know that. Thank you.
That's fine, and I appreciate it. I do think the public safety of the citizens of the state of Georgia probably trump any perceived cost that we may incur.
You have another question by the senator from the 18th.
Yes, sir.
Gentleman from
Senator
Bibb.
yield.
Absolutely.
Senator, do I understand your amendment, which would basically end after the word confidential and does not incorporate the limitations of $250,000, an award of $250,000 or more, which is in Amendment 1. So does that mean that your proposal is that all lottery winners remain confidential, and would that include down to a $10 ticket winner?
If Amendment number 1 passes, this would only apply to those above $250,000.
And would you, if Amendment number 1 does not pass, do you still propose to offer and ask for a vote on Amendment number 2 as written?
I would, if it doesn't pass, but I don't know that anybody would request anonymity on a $5 winning. If it gets to be a problem, I think we can cure that legislatively.
Thank you, Senator.
No further questions. All right, the question is on adoption, the adoption of Amendment number 1, authored by the senator from the 30th, as well as the minority leader, the senator from the 41st. Is there objection to the amendment, Amendment number 1? Without objection, Amendment number 1 is now adopted. Now the question comes to adoption number 2, authored by the senator from the 37th, the gentleman from Cobb. Is there objection? There is objection by the senator from the 31st. All those in favor of amendment number 2, authored by the senator from the 37th, rise, stand, and be counted. If you are in favor of amendment number 2, rise, stand, and be counted. Rise, stand, and be counted if you're in favor of the gentleman from Cobb's amendment. Reverse. On the adoption of amendment number 2, the yeas are 27, the nays are 4, and amendment number 2 has been adopted. Now, does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection? Agreed to report of committee which failed pass the bill. Chairs none. Report of committee is agreed to. All those in favor of the bill as amended will vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary will unlock the machine. on the adoption of this bipartisan bill authored by the minority leader. Senators are 50, the yeas are 51 and the nays are 4. And this bill, having received a requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Secretary will read House Bill 661.
House Bill 661 by Representatives Williamson, the 115th, and others. The bill will be titled enactment Titles 15, 44, and 48 of the OCGA relating to courts, property, and revenue and taxation, respectively, so as to revise provisions relating to the transmittal, filing, recording, access to, and territorial effect of tax liens issued by the Department of Revenue, provide for electronic record keeping relating to the filing and public access to state tax liens, and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair recognizes now the distinguished senator from the 3rd to present the bill. Please give the senator your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last year, we passed a bill that created a more efficient and transparent method to record Department of Revenue liens. Unfortunately, as a part of that process, there was some ambiguity in the language that gave rise to an interpretation that would have required you to obtain a certificate of clearance, that is, getting permission from the department before you could record a deed. And this, of course, would prove to not be very pragmatic. It had the potential of disrupting our race notice statute, which protects property rights, and it requires you should record a deed as quickly as possible. It also had the potential to impact priority of liens and our priority in our statute dealing with those liens and priorities that are given to recording. This bill just reverts back to our old system, and it provides that a Department of Revenue lien must be recorded in the county where the property is located, and it also eliminates the provision and makes it clear that you would not have to obtain a certificate of clearance before you record the deed. This bill has the support of the Georgia Superior Court Clerk's Authority, the mortgage banking industry, real estate closing attorneys, the State Bar, and the title insurance companies, and as well as the Department of Revenue. Mr. President, unless there are any questions, I would yield the well.
There are no questions, Senator. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is the objection agreed in the report of committee which fail to pass the bill? Chair is now report of committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? And the objection, chair is now the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? Question on the pass the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 55 and the nays are 0. This bill, having received a requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Chair now recognizes Senator from the 23rd. Read the caption.
The House offers the following amendment. Amend the Senate committee substitute to House Bill 159 by deleting lines 1 through 3,808 and inserting the following: to amend Title 19 of the OCGA relating to domestic relations so as to substantially revise the general provisions applicable to adoptions, to change the requirements for adopting children, provide for a non-resident to allow an adoption of his or her child, to provide for adoption of foreign-born children, provide for a waiver to revoke or surrender of parental rights under certain circumstances, change the age for individuals to access the adoption union registry, and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
What purpose is Senator from the 31st rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Could we ask the Secretary if this motion would be in order considering Rule 7-1.10B?
I will take that under advisement. Just a moment. The question is on notice, whether notice has been given on the bill. I think notice is adequately been given and was given Thursday. I don't know that. I'm not sure whether it was reflected in the journal or not, but the majority leader went to the well. I mean, I think everybody knows that this was coming, so it's not as if no one didn't have adequate notice. That's my ruling. Chair recognizes now Senator from the 23rd to speak to his motion.
As I'm sure everyone here knows, the House approved this by amendment, agreeing as amended, HB 159. I want to applaud the House for unanimously adopting nearly every change that the Senate suggested. I won't go into these in detail, but they dealt with who has the right to adopt, procedures in international adoptions, procedures in terminating a biological father's rights, and a compromise that was reached after the bill left the Senate. And that was on the right to rescind and the waiver of the right to rescind. The compromise extends the non-waiver period from 72 hours to 96 hours, but it shortens the rescission to 4 days. I believe this is a fair compromise, and we should agree to it accordingly. I also want to thank the House for including the safe home provisions that have been brought forth in the past by both chambers. And thanks is due also to the governor's staff for their guidance in making suggestions as to how the safe home provisions should be applied. And these were incorporated in what we discussed with the House between the time of the passage of the bill and the House's agreeing to the bill as amended. These included the requirement that nonprofits register annually with DFACS. Background checks were tightened. It was clarified that no misuse or defense against charges of abandonment or neglect could rely upon this power of attorney that we're affording parents. The powers of attorney would be filed annually. Excuse me, the powers of attorney would be filed with the probate court where the child resides. And if the child moves, in the probate court where the child moves to. Oversight by a licensed child placing agency was also clarified, and definitions and forms were amended accordingly. With these changes, the House unanimously passed both HB 159 and the safe home provisions that had passed both chambers previously. There was, however, a change that the House did not agree to, and that was in the area of living expenses of the birth mother when paid through private attorney adoptions. The House was motivated by the fact that 32 states in the Union have such provisions, including every state contiguous to the state of Georgia. That having been said, that we do not have to blindly follow other states. However, we don't have a consensus on how reasonable living expenses should be defined, what guidelines should be used, or the procedures by which they should be approved. So going forward, I intend to file a joint Senate-House Study Committee resolution to study the issue of living expenses. It's a very important substantive issue that touches on important policies that have long been in Georgia law. This study committee would look at the experience after we pass this bill and also look to the agencies that oversee this area to weigh the impact on the cost of adoption. It's very important that we keep adoption affordable for working families and to monitor for abuse so that private attorneys do not proceed too closely to the line against unlawful inducements. So this study committee that I intend to propose will look to guidelines, not just for private attorney adoptions, but for agency adoptions as well, because currently there are no guidelines, even in regulations. Also, caps can be considered in this deliberation, this study. Also, the procedures, whether this should come primarily through the department or through the courts. That being said, even though there's no consensus on that issue at this present time in our body, I believe that this is too important a bill to delay. That should not stop passage of a very good and urgently needed bill. At the same time, I fully expect that after a period of study, we will know better how to define living expenses and the procedures for approval. I urge your adoption of the motion. Mr. President, unless there are questions, I'll yield the well.
You do have a question. Senator from the 29th, do you wish to speak or question? Okay. Senator from the 48th, you wish a question? Nope. No questions, Senator.
Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Senator from the 29th to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to spend a moment or two recapping the process around which we have come to the point we find ourselves today. Originally, we were told that the original bill passed by the House needed to be passed clean, without any amendment, without any meddling by this body. And we had the bill was brought up very late in the evening on the final day of last year's legislative session. When we chose to table it, again, the cries were that it needed to be clean, unamended, no changes by the Senate. I frankly want to applaud the senator from the 23rd and those other senators who spent so much time in the interim, in the fall, in the winter, and even during this legislative session, perfecting this legislation, because that's what bicameral legislatures do. And I think that the bill that is before us today is substantively different from the bill that this body would have voted on the 40th day of last year's legislative session. And it is frankly much improved from the legislation that was before us on the 40th day of last year's legislative session. I do think it's important to note, because there's been an awful lot of discussion around this issue, that the final point of contention, I think, between the two bodies dealing with the authorization of private attorneys to pay for what's defined in the bill as living expenses is not related to the issue that we've heard about over and over again, which is expediting the process of adoptions out of our foster care system to bring Georgia in line with the national average. That is a separate issue which I think is very, very well addressed in the balance of the bill, but the living expenses language is not part of that conversation. And I think that the Senate has shown very good faith, the senator from the 3rd particularly, by saying on a different issue that was also unrelated to speeding up foster care adoptions, that we would deal with that with a separate bill. But I certainly understand that the legislative process is about compromise, and obviously the vast majority of this bill addresses an urgent problem that needs to be solved. And so I'll certainly join the senator from the 23rd in supporting the motion. Just as a final note, I do want to remark for a moment on some of the debate and discussion around this legislation. I've come to this well before when both Republicans and Democrats have engaged in what I think is unbecoming conduct for people involved in the legislative process. The predecessor to the current senator from the 39th, when there was a member of the House who tried to compare him to being an ISIS terrorist for just talking about Confederate monuments in our history, I came to this well and said that was irresponsible, that was wrong, because it damages our process. And to see reporting suggesting that the president of our Senate was anything but committed to adding the language of House Bill 359 because he believes, like I believe, and I think the majority of Republicans believe, that we don't need a nanny state that controls every decision that a parent might make, and that parents find themselves in a position many times where they need to be empowered to make the decisions that the language of House Bill 359 allows them to do, particularly military parents, who I've had the opportunity to work with quite a bit in my Senate district. And I just think that's wrong, and it's something that is beneath our public policy process. I also want to say a word about some of the things that have been said about my good friend, the senator from the 48th. You know, he's come to this well and eloquently talked about his personal story, that he knows a lot about this process because he's been adopted. I've had the pleasure of knowing him for over a decade before I was elected to this body. And for people to suggest that he is motivated in this debate by anything other than a sincere desire to make sure that adoptions are within the reach of everyday Georgians is really disappointing. It's really disappointing. And I'm a short timer here. I've only got 25 days left after today. But I think that we all need to think about the fact that the words that we use matter, and the things that we say about other members and their motivations matter. And we ought to be better than that. I think in the Senate chamber we have been better than that. But we really need to work on improving the quality and the tone of the debate, particularly when it's around issues as important as this one. So again, I thank the senator from the 23rd for his incredible work on this. I look forward to supporting the motion, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a few of these thoughts with you during our debate. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Thank you, Senator. Chair now recognizes the distinguished senator from the 48th.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I went on Friday to my safe deposit box and dug out a copy of my adoption decree from 52 years ago, and I found with it the letter from the attorney and a copy of his bill to my parents for my adoption. In October of 1965, I guess it was about 6 months after I was born, the bill was $100. Now, $100 today would be $100 in 1965 would be a lot more today. Maybe it'd be $2,000 or $3,000. But I believe that the cost of adoption is too high and is unaffordable for many Georgia families. And I have repeatedly raised the concern that, intentionally or not, that allowing the additional costs in this bill will make it even more burdensome for Georgia families to adopt. There's been some suggestion that that my concern about the rising cost of adoption means that I'm against adoption altogether, or that I'm against this adoption bill, and I wanted to take just a moment to address that very forthrightly. I believe that those in this chamber and the chamber across the hall who disagree with me on this issue have the best interests of Georgia children and families at heart. They simply look at this issue differently than I do. And I think that we've got to be careful as members of the General Assembly not to personalize these disputes. That's not to say that we shouldn't, that it's wrong to believe passionately about an issue or to argue passionately about the issue, but the argument needs to focus on the merits, on achieving the best public policy outcome, and not trying to win or lose an argument or a debate. I wish that there was some way mechanically for me to get before this body a vote on the question of allowing these additional expenses. The way our rules are written, there's not a mechanism for me to do so. And so I'm left with either voting for or against the bill. I believe that the underlying bill makes important changes to the adoption system that will speed up adoptions, and it's my intention to vote in favor of it. If there are no questions, I will yield the well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Chair now recognizes Senator from the 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief. Originally, when this came up, I had concerns dealing with one aspect of the bill, which was the issue of power of attorney. But through the hard work of all the parties involved, especially the senator from the 23rd, who's done a tremendous job on this, that issue, I believe, has been cleared up, and I think it's a tremendous idea to address other issues through a study commission or study committee, in that this shows how when persons get together and work very diligently, we can get a good bill that I think is actually a good bipartisan bill, and there's still some issues that maybe need to be resolved, but can be resolved through the tenacious ability of all the persons that have been working on this up to this point forward. So I thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. The senator from the 23rd has moved that Senate agree to the House amendment to the Senate substitute to House Bill 159. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the motion to agree to the House amendment to the Senate substitute, the yeas are 53 and the nays are 2. And the Senate has agreed to the House amendment to the Senate substitute. I want to say a special thank you to all the Senate members who have worked diligently on this important issue. I want to also thank the House for their great work as well in engaging in this process, along with the governor, who was at the table, particularly on the power of attorney. And we are very, very grateful for all, including the senator from the 23rd, members of the Judiciary Committee, and all of the Senate who have brought us to this conclusion. Thank you all very, very much. Chair recognizes Senator from the 46th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate stand adjourned until 10 o'clock a.m. on Tuesday, February the 6th.
Read the announcements.
Rules will meet upon adjournment in 450 of the Capitol. Appropriations Transportation Subcommittee will meet at 1 p.m. in 341 of the Capitol. Appropriations Judicial Subcommittee will meet at 1 p.m. in 125 of the Capitol. Appropriations Insurance Subcommittee will meet at 2 p.m. in 341 of the Capitol. Education and Youth has been canceled. Appropriations Economic Development Subcommittee will meet at 3 p.m. in 341 of the Capitol. Appropriations Criminal Justice Subcommittee will meet at 4 p.m. in 341 of the Capitol. Judiciary will meet at 4:30 p.m. in 307 of the COB. That concludes the order.
The majority leader has moved the Senate stand adjourned till 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. All those in favor will say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes clearly have it. We stand adjourned.